Well, police say he brazenly gunned down a healthcare CEO on the streets of New York City, and now accused killer Luigi Mangione is facing federal murder charges. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips. This afternoon, Luigi Mangione will appear in a federal courtroom in Manhattan. A federal indictment was just unsealed. Mangione now faces 4 counts of stalking, murder through the use of a firearm, and a firearms offense involving a silencer. Mangione landing in New York after waiving extradition from Pennsylvania, where he was arrested after days on the lam. Videos capture the 26-year-old's transport earlier today, first driven to an airport in Altoona before being loaded onto a small plane to New York, a swath of security in tow the entire time, and Mangione clad in shackles. The accused killer also facing first and second-degree murder charges in New York City related to that Midtown Manhattan killing of Brian Thompson during the early morning hours of December 4th. Sources now telling us that the expected federal charges that await could make Mangione eligible for the death penalty. Let's bring in our legal contributor and trial attorney, Brian Buckmeyer, by phone. So, Brian, I guess let's first start with Mangione's arraignment today. What can we expect?
Mangione is going to be doing an arraignment, which is an initial appearance before a criminal court, where he gets to hear the charges as you've outlined in the federal case. And then the judge will decide as to whether or not bail should be set. But considering the nature of the charges, I would assume that he would be denied bail and be remanded as the case then progresses. The next question would be is when and if he's going to show up in a Manhattan courthouse to then hear these state charges.
Got it. All right. So let's just talk about the state and federal charges here and the federal side of things and how that could make him, he could face the death penalty, right?
Absolutely. So in the state of New York, there is no death penalty. The highest charge of murder in the first degree, which he faces in state court, has a penalty of life without the possibility of parole. That's the highest sentence we have in the state. But in the federal court system, they do have the possibility of the death penalty. But we will know that far in advance of any type of trial because the government will have to make some sort of notification that they are seeking the death penalty. So while it is a possibility, we don't know if that's the actual sentence that the government will be seeking at this point in time.
All right, so Mangione's lawyer is now calling the federal charges a pile-on. We first knew about what he faced in state court, but now we're hearing about these federal charges. The lawyer's saying that it raises concerns of double jeopardy. Is he right?
So no, and I think currently Luigi Mangione's attorney is Karen Friedman Agnifilo. So I don't believe she's right in the sense of double jeopardy. Double jeopardy is when someone is tried for a case twice, not when they're charged for the same incident. We've seen cases like this when it comes to, for example, law enforcement officers that kill individuals being charged in both state and federal court. So that is possible, but I do share the sentiments, and I think most defense attorneys would, that it is somewhat of a pile-on, that where the state court has already secured an indictment for murder in the first degree, having the federal court then jump in as well to add additional charges would, in some senses, be considered a pile-on just because they already have such serious charges against this person.
Just as an attorney, and how this seems to be changing by the day, what are your thoughts on just this whole process, how much attention it's getting, and now just the multiple charges that we are learning about?
So I think now that we're learning what the federal charges are, they differ greatly from that of the state court being murder, and there are specific defenses that come from that that I think Luigi Mangione might have been able to avail himself, especially because of this groundswell of people supporting him. We've seen high-profile cases in the past where it begs the question of hero or villain, and we've seen people divided. I would point to Daniel Penny being the most recent one, people being divided based on not necessarily the crime, but the situation that revolves around it. Now we have the case of Luigi Mangione, and I don't even think it's much of a division, so much of that is people's frustration with the medical insurance industry bleeding into a homicide case where people are not necessarily looking at the facts of, did he plan the murder? Did he do it? Was it premeditated? They're looking at it as a point of, I'm frustrated with the medical industry, and they are championing Luigi Mangione to some extent. And I say that as an interesting aspect, only because at some point, 12 people are going to have to sit and hear this case, and that could be somewhat of an influential factor in determining guilt or innocence.
Yeah, we should point out, as we do have this conversation, which is an important conversation to have, that he wasn't even covered by UnitedHealthcare. And that was one of the surprises, Brian, that we learned as we continued to cover this story. By the way, we are looking at live pictures now. It really is fascinating as here we are talking about the groundswell of support for Mangione, and not, not over the crime, but the frustration with medical insurance. At the same time, look at the security, Brian, around him. I mean, I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I mean, almost a dozen members of law enforcement and federal officers all around him, giving him security as he enters the courtroom.
Yeah, and that's a lot. I've had my fair share of extradition cases where a client is either going to a different state or coming from a different state, and this amount of security is not normal. I think it really lends itself to the nature of this case and the high level of publicity that comes from it as well.
So let's talk about federal executions as we continue to stay on these live pictures. It's interesting to note, by the way, when we remember when we first saw Mangione and how he was screaming at people as he was being taken into jail. When we first saw that he was caught and arrested, he's much more subdued, much calmer. The security around him incredibly intense, from the NYPD to the FBI. They are all the armed guards now bringing him into that van. And the fact that it is created, as you said, just this this national conversation, not only around the crime and how he did it, but the fact that he wasn't even insured by UnitedHealthcare. And a lot of people did not know that at first. And so that sort of pivoted the conversation away from all this concentration on Brian Thompson, the CEO of UnitedHealthcare, and just this overall discussion, like you said, about frustration within healthcare. But now bringing it down to what he faces, and that the federal charges open up the possibility of the death penalty. Federal executions are rare, right? There's only been, what, a dozen to 16 federal executions since the 70s, the early 70s, but 13 of those apparently under President Trump. So now he's coming into office. You have this story that's dominating the headlines. How likely would it be that Mangione could actually receive the penalty and that it be carried out?
I think it's very unlikely for a number of reasons. One, the stat that you're reciting out to our viewers about the number of people who actually do face the death penalty. Does the fact that Donald Trump, the president-elect, seems to be president of the United States, will be in office, and we did see a groundswell of executions during his presidency, have an impact on that? Absolutely. But also, I think if you look at it from a geographic standpoint as well, the Southern District of New York encompasses Manhattan.
Terry Austin, I want to bring you in as well, former trial attorney and legal analyst. Just listening to the conversation I was having with Brian there, your thoughts as an attorney, as a legal analyst who has covered so many murder cases with us. What do you think, why do you think there is so much interest in this case and in Luigi Mangione and in this conversation around medical insurance, the frustration with medical insurance, and just the groundswell of support that he is getting? And I should point out, not about the crime that was committed. We should never support murder, but just the frustration that has been brought out since Mangione allegedly committed this crime, and of course, this so-called manifesto that he had written.
Exactly. This is the type of case I think that the society wants to see, and that the prosecutions, both on the federal side and the state side, they want to make sure that they're focused in on this. I think as far as communities are concerned, they are frustrated, and they are looking at the healthcare system as a failure here in the United States. But as you said, Kira, there is absolutely no excuse for murder here, and that's exactly what happened. It was someone who shot someone in the back, and it was someone who could have done other things. Louisiana is a smart person. Mangione, he is someone who has been educated. He is someone who really could have started a swell against the healthcare company, could have started a boycott, could have gotten many people behind him. And instead, he decided to take the law in his own hands. And we saw that Governor Hochul said, no, you cannot do this. The police commissioner said, we will not accept this in the state of New York. And so what you're seeing on the prosecutorial side is the firm backing of pursuing the maximum penalty, both on the state side and the federal side. What I haven't seen is the fact that both state and federal are doing this at the same time. And it does look as though the federal case is going to proceed before the state case, but he's being brought in front of both courts. So it's going to be interesting to see how, in fact, this is handled on both levels.
What do you think are some of the challenges for prosecutors in a high-profile case like this?
Well, certainly on the state side, if in fact they proceed with both that murder one, murder two charge, and they've tied in the terrorism to that, that's going to be difficult. This is an individual who shot another individual. It's not what we commonly think of as a terrorist act. But what the prosecution, what Bragg said he wanted to do is, look, this person was trying to make a statement. He had, as you said, a manifesto. He was trying to say something about large corporations and how unfair these large corporations are, particularly in the health industry. And so he's trying to make a statement. And I think on the state side, they will certainly pursue the social media that we saw, people coming out and supporting this defendant, when in fact he is someone who shot someone in cold blood. And I definitely think that the prosecution is going to look at what happened, and they're going to be able to at least try to tie in that terrorism, saying that it was intended to intimidate.